Greetings, everybody. Welcome to today's 5th installment of On This Wood Table. Today's main subject is going to be this M&P Metal HD steel frame. Our main topic of today is going to be an Apex trigger install. Alongside with that, I will also be doing a extended mag release install, a Magwell install. I'll also be doing a Optic install when we get to the slide segment section of the video. If you don't have an armorer's block, a roll of tape like this will also work just fine. A 330 seconds roll pin punch. And if you don't have a pin punch, they include this pretty much equivalent punch here that you can also use on your frame. A 7/64 hex key, and a hammer. By the way, you will only need this hex key if you are dealing with the steel frame, because pretty much the only purpose of this hex key is just going to be to remove the over travel stop. Polymer frames do not have a removable over travel stop, and I believe for the aluminum frames you actually don't even need a hex key, you just need a punch. When it comes to this pin and the rear, they are interchangeable and they can come out either way. It's only the trigger pin that cannot be mixed up and can only go in from this side and taken out from this side. There we go. We are just going to focus on this Sear block for now. Those of you who would like to remove your safety on your safety model to do a safety delete and all that stuff, the process that I just did is pretty much all you really need to do. Once you take it out of the frame, the safety will pretty much just come right with it. Maybe. Or if you take out the Sear block, sometimes it'll stay behind. And another thing, in this little space right here, there's a detent. It'll have like a spring. It'll be held in by spring pressure. So all you really need to do is just sort of, push it back and lift it upwards. Now, Apex includes different spring weights when it comes to the Sear, and this is what lets you, or part of what lets you adjust the trigger pull. Purple being their heaviest spring, orange being their lightest spring, and their unpainted silver spring here, what they call their duty carry spring. So it's like a medium. I'm going to be using the orange spring. Same thing with the trigger spring. The green one here is their heaviest trigger spring, and here is their carry duty trigger spring. We just want to remove this pin, and it only is removed one way, and it only goes in one way. And we've got your Sear and your Sear actuator. Both of these are going to be replaced. So before you fully remove the Sear pin here, put pressure over that Sear so that it doesn't jump out and you'll lose your spring cap, This is an important pin. This pin only goes here. Do not lose this pin. Without this pin, gun is dead. And you can see what is left behind is the Sear spring. And on top of that Sear spring, Apex also sends you this little cap that goes right on top. So you aren't going to use the Sear and Sear actuator that are stock with the gun, unless you want to, but you cannot interchange the parts. So this actuator will not work with the OEM Sear, and the Apex Sear will not work with the OEM actuator. So these two have to be together if you want to use this combination. That goes like this. So you want to hold that down, and you want to reinsert your Sear pin so if you see this gap here, that is where our Sear actuator goes. The orientation of the Sear actuator should go like this. If you see this little groove here, or this indent, that is space for this part, the half moon cut piece here on the Sear. So we're just going to back out our pin just enough, and you just kind of, you sort of just scoop it in there, and then push in all the way on the Sear pin, and there we go. And that is it for the Sear block. Now on to the next part, which would be removal of the trigger and the trigger bar. Before you take out these pins, make sure that this takedown lever is not blocking their way. So here's where you're going to need that 7/64 to get to this over travel plunger. And you want to do it clockwise. Right, they did it clockwise for that. And the reason you need to take it out is because it needs to, it won't give the Apex trigger enough clearance to break the shot. It'll just stop it. So with our trigger assembly here uninstalled, you do want to keep the trigger bar. They do not include a trigger bar. I wish Apex would already have their shoes pre-installed with the trigger bar, but we haven't gotten there yet. So we need to do it pretty much ourselves. To take the trigger shoe off, you just need to remove this pin here. Definitely easier to do it on this side, since this is where the trigger bar is making contact. That way you don't need to take this all the way out, just enough so that you can remove the trigger bar here. See, just a little bit of the pin is out, and now trigger bar has been removed. And now here with the Apex trigger, we're pretty much just going to do the same thing, just backwards. So this little pocket here is where the trigger bar slides into. Orientation of the trigger bar is definitely important. You don't want to put it upside down. For this next part, I'm just going to be using a vise to sort of just push this pin to lock in this trigger bar. You know that trigger bar installation is correct if it has free movement. If it does not have free movement and you find it binding somewhere, or if it's just stiff or something, that could potentially mean that your pin placement and trigger bar placement is not exactly 100%, and that will definitely cause some issues. What you will have to do is walk out that pin again and retry. When it comes to my polymer frames, I use the Duty Carry trigger spring and the orange Sear spring. For this one, I kind of want to try orange Sear spring and factory bronze trigger spring. Something I have found with previous combinations, like when I would do OEM trigger spring with orange Sear spring on my polymer frames, what I have found to have what would happen sometimes while I'm pressing the trigger, since the weight is just so light, the trigger would pivot backwards, or it would pivot back, right? It would press back faster than the safety could clear the frame. So sometimes you would just get a really hard trigger, and then you would need to press it again, and it wouldn't feel right. And that has happened to me. Because I was using the OEM trigger spring with the orange Sear spring. I want to give it another chance for the steel frame. Maybe it might be different. If it's not, if it doesn't feel different and it's still having the same issues, then I will change this to the Duty Carry trigger spring. When you loop it through this hole here on the trigger bar, the open side will be facing upwards. Now we can move on to the reassembly. With installation of the Sear block, make sure that the tail, this little tail, goes right into this channel. You know, this, I don't know what they call this part, the Sear enclosure, it's removable, and I'm surprised no one has made like a brass weighted Sear enclosure here. Maybe someday. the trigger is just moving back so fast, or fast enough that the safety doesn't have enough time to clear. But here I have the duty carry spring, as opposed to before I had the OEM trigger spring. No, I think the name on this wood table is so funny. When I originally just kind of said it out of nowhere in my first video, I kind of had that TV show, this old house, on my head, or in my thoughts, in my brain, in my head. Oh my lord! But you know how they on TV they're like, or before, right? It would be like, oh, on this old house. So I just kind of thought like, oh, on this wood table. I think it's kind of a dumb name. I'm just kind of rolling with it, really. This is a bit of a different installation process than the polymer frame. The polymer frames don't have this extended part right here. It's just the rails. And that concludes our frame segment of the Apex trigger install. Yes. There we go. Yeah. So, when it's installed, this little key, or I'm just going to call it a key, is in its lock, which is why I said you can turn it either way and it'll come out. It is held under spring tension, so this is a piece that you don't want to lose. Springer Precision does not give you an extra spring here, so keep it, take care of it, don't lose it. Installation of the Springer Precision brass magwell. It's pretty easy, but before we do that, we do need to put the grip back together. If you have seen my last video, you would know, or I talked about how I switched to the large backstrap on my polymer frames, but removed the beaver tail. So after, further having this frame, some more time of having this frame, it has occurred to me that even though they are supposed to be the same pistol, like the polymer and the steel frame, the steel frame has a slight deviance in geometry from the polymer frame. So even though they're supposed to be the same size, they don't exactly feel one for one the same, even with the same backstraps. What I am testing now is that for the steel frame, I'm going to try the medium large backstrap, which reduces the width here just a bit, but adds the beaver tail. I'm going to try how that feels. Springer Precision does include the Allen key hex wrench. I don't know what this Allen key that you need for this, so you don't need to buy one. Frame has been completed. Now, for the very last step when it comes to the Apex trigger install, is no longer on the frame section here, but will now be on our slide. So what does an Apex trigger have to do with the slide? Well, the slide, especially, at least for striker fires, right, they have this thing called a striker block, which would be this little plunger looking thing here. Type of slide you have, whether it be the OR or non-OR, OR meaning optics ready, or if you're coming from Glock, MOS, I don't remember what MOS means. Mounted optic system, maybe. Anyway, if you have the OR version, it's a lot easier. If you do not have the optics ready version, it's a bit more tedious. If you have a non-OR slide and you are installing the Apex plunger, it will be located right underneath the iron sights. The iron sights for the non-OR version do like a sort of slope configuration here. Like this part is just solid. And the base of the iron sight is over here, and it goes up at an angle over this shelf. And the plunger is hidden right underneath the iron sights. So with the non-OR version, you would essentially have to shift the rear iron sight over just enough that it exposes the cap that holds the plunger. That plunger is under spring pressure, so make sure you don't lose it and cover that. You would just take out the plunger, take out the cap. I'm sorry, there's a cap there. You take out the cap. The cap also keeps the spring aligned, and you take out the plunger through there. You would then take your new Apex plunger and plunger spring, insert it there, put the cap over it, and then you have to shift your rear sight back over it. That's the non-OR slide. With this OR slide, this is when you will need your, it may or may not be the 5/64 hex wrench. Anyway, that's just what you need to take off these screws for the cover plate. And that exposes the mounting section. And right under this metallic little teardrop shape plate is where you will find your OEM plunger and spring. To take that out, you are going to need the absolute most smallest hex wrench I think I have ever seen. You're going to need a 0.05 hex wrench for this cover plate here. So we want to take our Apex plunger here, or striker block, the Apex spring that comes with it, just drop it right in there. And if you can see this little tiny stud right here, that is where you want to place your spring, or that's what is holding the spring in place, so that it doesn't bend or bind up inside that little well, that striker block well. So this helps it stay, straight, in line. So make sure you have it on there. The non-OR version will just have like a black cap, but it will also have that stud on there. That is it when it comes to the Apex trigger and spring and Sear and all that. That's pretty much the process. Then you would just do reassembly. So I did say that we are going to do a optic installation. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you probably already know what optic that I'm choosing for my slide. And that would be the Aimpoint Acro P2. Yes, I do have an Instagram. I don't really post repeatedly on my timeline. I mostly post in my stories, but I think Instagram is, it's okay. I think it's a good site if you want to talk to me. I will be using the Calculated Kinetics dog tag for the Acro. They're also based in including the screws and the exact bit Phillips head that you need for said screws. And they do include the special jelly sauce, the edible jelly sauce. What do you call it? The soy sauce, yeah. They add the soy sauce. I'm going to use torque specs. Some people don't use torque specs for these. I'm not sure why. That's probably why I'm seeing an influx of videos of people's dots just completely jumping off their slides mid-reciprocation. It hasn't happened to me. I like to adhere myself to a proper torque spec. That's just how I like to do things when it comes to this sort of stuff, when it comes to plates, optics, and even my LMT barrel. Like, I do follow the torque specs. So far, no torque spec has failed me, so I'm going to keep rolling with that. The torque spec for the calculated kinetics dog tag plate here is around 12 to 15 inch-pounds. So I'm just going to use my, what is this, a Torx wrench? Use my Torx wrench here. All right. Actually, before I go ham on that one, I'm going to try to do both of them at the same time so there's no weird, like, pressure difference going on here. You know, I've actually been curious about the Acro for years now, really. I actually almost bought an Acro back when it was new. And when I heard about their issues of, like, things getting inside the glass, because this is a closed emitter, some people would find, like, there's internal fogging or just debris getting in the inside and showing up on the glass. So that really, I'll admit, that really turned me off from ever getting this optic. Years later, you know, fast forward to last Wednesday, a couple days ago, I bought a new one, and I hope that Aimpoint fixed that issue. If not, then, well, you guys will definitely know about it. I can tell you that right now. I actually used to have this battery cap on my T2, my Aimpoint T2, and now it has found new life on this Acro. The torque specs for the Aimpoint Acro seem to be 26, 27-ish inch-pounds. I don't know if these need the magical blue jelly, but just in case, I don't think it would hurt to put some. There we have it. I do plan on getting an Apex barrel for this slide eventually, whenever they come in stock. Those barrels are, like, really hard to get. Now we are going to test for proper function. Here is our Apex striker block, which acts as a safety. You shouldn't be able to see the firing pin protrude from its channel here while the striker block is fully engaged. Now with that striker block pushed downward, you should be able to see the firing pin protruding there. What should happen when I let go is that it should reset, and that the striker block should go back up, and the firing pin should not be able to go forward again. That seems to be the case. Striker went back up, back to original position. Now for the frame. Pull the trigger back. The tail end here, by the way, this is the part that comes in contact with the striker block. This part is what pushes it upwards when it makes its way back, while also pushing on the Sear actuator that is pushing the Sear back here downward. And that seems to be the case here. Now this little, I don't remember what this was called. The Sear switch. Not a switch like that, but like, you know, the on and off switch, which, if I have it downward, raises the Sear in a permanent flat position. So, in that position, the Sear is inoperable. So while this is downwards, you shouldn't be able to fire. Although, this is not meant to be like a safety that you activate. This is something more that you use for disassembly, because because just like the Glock, you have to press the trigger to disassemble, and this was a way to make it so that you didn't have to press the trigger to disassemble. When you would have the slide back and you push this down, and you unlocked it from here, it would just slide off. No trigger press required. So when you insert a magazine, it would turn the Sear back on, and now it can go back to its proper function. And there we have it. Our brand new steel metal HD build. Or, I don't know if it's a build, but, parts. Apex trigger install. Magazine, extended mag release install. I don't know why this part I keep getting caught on this part. Magwell install. Aimpoint acro install.